The colonial station on Barath 9 hummed with the usual cacophony of alien commerce, chittering, hissing, and the occasional guttural roar that made the translators work overtime. Alden moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his weathered hands clutching a satchel of mining tools. Humans were still novelties here, soft-skinned oddities that most species regarded with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. He didn't mind. Anonymity had its advantages. The attack came without warning. 3 Kelvin raiders materialized from an alley, their segmented bodies gleaming like oiled machinery. Alden's hand moved toward his plasma cutter, but he knew he'd never make it. Kelvrans were hunters, apex predators from a death world that made Earth look like a paradise resort. Then something small and furious launched itself between Alden and the lead Kelvran. Ruck was barely past his adolescent molt, a Sarathi youth with midnight black fur and eyes that burned like twin suns. The predator cub stood no taller than Alden's waist, but what he lacked in size he compensated for with raw ferocity. His claws, beautiful curved things that caught the station's artificial light, extended fully as he roared a challenge that echoed off the metal walls. The Kelvrans laughed, a sound like grinding gears. What happened next lasted perhaps 10 seconds, but Alden would replay it in his mind for years. Ruck moved like liquid violence, his small body a blur of black fur and flashing claws. He wounded 2 of them before the 3rd Kelvran caught him, its massive pincer clamping around Ruck's right paw. The sound of breaking bone and tearing keratin cut through everything else. Ruck screamed, a high-pitched keen that made Alden's chest constrict. The Kelvrans, satisfied with their cruelty and wary of station security, retreated into the shadows. Alden dropped to his knees beside the crumpled form of the cub, carefully cradling the injured paw. 3 of Ruck's 4 claws had been torn completely away, leaving only bleeding stumps. The 4th hung by threads of tissue. "Why?" Alden whispered, though he knew Ruck's translator collar could render the question into the clicking language of the Sarathi. Ruck's eyes, clouded with pain, focused on him. "You gave me food when others turned away. You spoke to me like I mattered." It was true. 3 weeks ago, Alden had found the young Sarathi scrounging in the station's refuse centers, alone and starving. He'd learned that Rook's pack had been killed by pirates, leaving the cub to fend for himself on a station where juvenile predators were seen as public menaces. Alden had started leaving portions of his meals, protein-rich foods that Rook's carnivorous biology required. Simple kindness, nothing more. But apparently it had been everything. Alden carried Ruck to his quarters, a cramped cube that served as both living space and workshop. The station's medical services would either euthanize a dangerous young predator or charge fees that Alden couldn't afford, and Ruck certainly couldn't pay. So Alden did what humans had done for millennia when systems failed them. He improvised. He cleaned and cauterized the wounds with supplies from his mining kit, working through Ruck's whimpers and his own tears. The cub would survive, but his claws, essential to a Sarathi's identity, their means of hunting, climbing, and defending, were gone forever. In Sarathi culture, a warrior without claws was barely considered alive. As Ruck drifted into an exhausted sleep, Alden stared at his workshop. Mining tools, metal scraps, a small forge he used for repairs. An idea began to form, audacious and probably insane. But humans had never been known for their sanity. For 3 days, Alden barely slept. He worked with materials he'd collected from the station's industrial sectors, titanium alloys, carbon fiber composites, micro servos salvaged from broken equipment. His hands, calloused and scarred, moved with the precision of a craftsman and the determination of a man possessed. He studied Ruck's remaining claw obsessively, measuring angles, curvature, weight distribution. He watched recordings of Sarathi warriors, analyzing how they moved, how they struck, how their claws retracted and extended. What he was attempting had never been done before: organic tissue and metal integration at a level beyond even most advanced medical facilities. But Alden had spent 20 years in the colonial mining corps, jury-rigging equipment that was supposed to be impossible to repair. He understood adaptation, improvisation, and the stubborn human refusal to accept limitations. On the fourth day, he held up his creation to the light. 4 metal claws, each one a masterpiece of human engineering. They weren't merely replacements, they were improvements. Stronger than bone, sharper than keratin, with retraction mechanisms powered by microservos that would respond to Rook's muscle movements. The base of each claw featured biocompatible anchors that would fuse with the remaining bone structure. The installation was brutal. Alden worked for 6 hours, his hands steady despite the weight of what he was doing. Rook bore it with the stoicism of his warrior species, teeth clenched, eyes fixed on Alden's face with absolute trust. When it was finished, Rook extended his new claws for the first time. They slid out smoothly, catching the light with an otherworldly gleam. The metal sang, a soft, crystalline note that made the air shimmer. Rook stared at them in wonder, flexing and retracting them experimentally. Then he looked at Alden with an expression that transcended species. "They're beautiful," Rook clicked, his translator collar rendering the reverence in his voice. Word spread through the station like wildfire. The human who had forged metal claws for a predator cub, the soft-skinned alien who had done what the galaxy's most advanced civilizations never attempted. Not because they couldn't, but because they never thought to care. Other species had technology. They had efficiency, logic, advanced materials. But humans had something else, something that made them dangerous, unpredictable, and absolutely invaluable in a cold universe. They had compassion paired with ingenuity. They had the ability to see a broken thing and refuse to let it stay broken. They looked at problems and asked not, "Should we?" but "How can we?" Rook stood beside Alden now as they walked through the station, metal claws gleaming, head held high. Where before aliens had seen a pitiful cub, they now saw something else, a warrior reborn through human will. And they looked at Alden differently too, not as a soft creature to be dismissed, but as something more complex, something that could turn scrap metal into miracles, something that, when pushed, didn't break, it built.